All right, Jake. We have some more developments tonight in the Elimination Chamber match with new additions, including 2 qualifying matches. So in the first one, we had a bit of a surprise winner with Kiana James. Curious what you make of that to begin with here.
Yeah, it was an interesting choice. I liked the finish. It was kind of clever. We don't typically see the 3-person matches end with all 3 people involved right in the finish like that. And so it was fun. And I don't dislike Kiana James as an act. I think she's exhibited more character range than her partner Giulia for the most part on TV recently, and it seems like she's getting a little bit sharper in the ring. It was a shame, that just a few minutes earlier they had that sort of botched near fall where it didn't look like she kicked out at the right moment, just like 30 seconds earlier. But they
were going to replay it from a second angle and decided not to.
For good reason. Yeah, she definitely did not kick out. But for the most part, I thought the 3 women had a pretty decent match, and I guess getting some new blood into the chamber seems to be a priority on both sides of the equation for the men and the women, and I think it's a good thing. The chamber is a rare opportunity when people can get a showcase without a whole lot of career stakes on the line for things like that, where they can end up not winning the match but still add a little bit to their resume, so to speak.
So we saw late in the show before the main event, Charlotte assuring Alexa Bliss she'd be okay not having won, and so I'm kind of curious, what are we making of where Charlotte and Alexa are at this point? Because they teased earlier a Charlotte Jade stare down, which almost seemed to like give away that Charlotte was going to win and face and be the person maybe to face Jade Cargill at WrestleMania. I think they did a nice job with a little swerve there, a little misdirection. Obviously, they're going to eventually clash. They want to build that up. But in the meantime, people are kind of waiting for Bliss and Charlotte to break up or turn on each other. Do you look at that exchange as more indications of that, or a tease of it, or trying to make us think it's not going to happen? What do you think of the latest with those 2?
Well, I think there's some meat on the bone to the idea of a Jade and Charlotte match. I think that's clearly something they have on their radar. If not for WrestleMania, then for the near future. Given the way that everything transpired tonight in the sequence of events, it seems like perhaps the breakdown of Alexa Bliss and Charlotte Flair may be over the world title match. So maybe Alexa Bliss could be your surprise winner of the Elimination Chamber, and that further drives the wedge between her and Charlotte, and then you're kind of off to the races from there.
Do you think Bliss or Charlotte, it's obvious which of those 2 will end up being a heel? Is it 90-10 or is it 50-50? And is there a right way or wrong way that it can go for WWE when they do pull the trigger, if they should, on that?
I mean, my preference, and I guess that's no indication of what WWE will actually do, but my preference would be for Alexa Bliss to be the heel here. I think they've done at least a commendable amount of work to make Charlotte Flair a more humanized version of herself on screen. And I think it would be wasteful to just have that immediately revert back to the Queen and the monotonous promos and the whole bit that made her sort of I guess you'd call it a tired act, essentially, during the latter part of that run before she kind of embarked on this this sort of redemption journey of sorts. And so I think Alexa's the better candidate to be the heel, and I hope they go in that direction.
Anything else stand out with Kiana James and the story they're telling with her, and what you make of her getting into the chamber?
I don't know if it's necessarily a verdict on her long term. I think it's just a bit of evidence that that was obvious to me when they drafted her when they did. It was kind of a shock to everybody when she got drafted that she was coming up, and it seemed like it was a surprise to her in that moment. And then she unfortunately got hurt and spent a considerable amount of time recovering from that. But I think they've always had eyes on her becoming more of a player, and this is just a way to get her an opportunity to pad her resume, to have another good showing in a big match, and then we go from there. I don't think it's necessarily, she's earmarked for a title run or anything like that. I just think they're trying to give her more exposure and more opportunity to sort of catch a spark and get over with the fans.
Yeah, it's one of the big topics in the chat so far is Kiana James's win, and I understand it. The first Sean Plitchett did comment on the kick out saying Kiana needed to kick out. It made the ref look so bad. The crowd noticed and booed too. Derek Mitchell said, I'm glad Kiana James qualified for the chamber as new blood is being added. Why didn't Giulia come out and congratulate her? Can you imagine Virgil qualifying for King of the Ring and Teddy DiBiase not? Okay, there's a vintage Derek Mitchell retro reference there. Kiana Sadler version 3 says Kiana actually started getting reactions now. I hope she continues to build. Adam Kidd says she's definitely got a look. Then Sean Plitch adds, I'm glad Kiana did win because there is something there. Get her away from Giulia, please. And here we are. Atlasphere says they've given Kiana some big moments in the Rumble and then tonight in this match. And Adam Kidd says, yeah, she got a spotlight in the Rumble. Goodfellas said, I feel like I'm in the minority, but I really enjoyed tonight. Youth movement continues. I love Kiana winning. And he talks about Trick and Tom and Elia and other positives on the show also. Then Mayface 6712 says, I agree about Kiana. Nothing wrong with new blood. So anyway, yeah, just looking at the chat comments, it's anecdotal, it's small sample size, but I think people are ready to see her do more. The role that she was put in for people who didn't really have a lot of background with her is just, she's a sidekick, a spokesperson for Giulia. Can Kiana James end up being 2-3 years from now a bigger star than Giulia with all the acclaim Giulia had coming in?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And I think it really speaks to what WWE fans respond to is, I think Giulia might, you can argue that she's more accomplished in the ring. I think most people would agree with that. And she typically has harder hitting matches. But that's not typically what drives people getting over in WWE. It's the dynamic personalities, the character work, the promos. And I think Kiana seemingly having a leg up on Giulia, at least for the time being, is a reflection of that. I think there's probably a future where both of them are over and Giulia is able to overcome, some of the deficits that she's shown, particularly in the personality department. But all that's kind of hard to predict from here. But I think given the trajectory they're on now, I think that's more likely than not that Kiana will be sticking around and still be over in 3 or 4 years versus Giulia.
As far as that topic, Atlasphere says if the extent of Giulia's character development is randomly screaming backstage, Kiana will be well ahead of her within a year. It can be a little bit of a crutch for Giulia to have somebody speaking for her because it can allow WWE to write her in a very simple derivative way, just guttural yells like they do for some people who are English as their second language or not a language they speak much at all. So it can work against her if they kind of dumb down the presentation of her character, and then Kiana is taken away, and then you're left with a good worker, but not a lot of personality development.
Well, and I think natural charisma plays a part too, because you have the flip side of the coin where Stephanie Vicaire is another English as a second language performer who clearly is making a lot of effort to improve in her English, but she's still somebody who is at a point in her journey of learning a new language where she's probably thinking in one language and translating to the other. And it leads to some awkward pauses and pronunciation issues and things like that. But she's got a lot of physical charisma that Giulia just seems to lack. And I think people have latched onto her much quicker as a result of it.
Yeah. Some more comments on Giulia here. Mark Pischetti says, Giulia isn't getting over. Kiana has more of a chance to fill that role. Pile Driver Pete says, I imagine James gets over before Giulia. So another vote for that. Mike Steff says Kiana has some momentum. Hopefully they'll capitalize on it. Darrell Freeman says Kiana's going to take the fall in the chamber, perhaps. Atlasphere says, if the extent of Giulia's character development is randomly screaming, Kiana will be well ahead of her. I guess I read that already. Sorry about that. And Derek Mitchell. Oh, go ahead.
Wouldn't Kiana have to take a fall in the chamber? It's an elimination match, so eventually she's going to be.
Unless she wins, she'll be taking a fall. Darrell, not the fall, maybe the I don't know, the first fall or the deciding fall is what he meant. I'm not sure. Derek Mitchell says, Giulia is giving me some great Sasuke vibes in 1997 as he was being billed as the ace of the new lightweight division, but he didn't perform well, and they went to Taka Michinoku and Brian Christopher. So a throwback there. Sadler version 3. I thought Kiana would fade into the background since she didn't get much hype for her call-up and got injured right away. She was okay in NXT, but nothing major. She might be a surprise star. Then Sean Plichta says, Giulia can do more than yell, but she has to want to do more. It's on her and the booking. Then Kavanti Small says, unless Giulia learns how to do more than yell in Japanese, she's not going far in WWE. Vaquer is a little ahead of her, but not by much. Pile Driver Pete says, I can't speak for everyone, but I'm good with subtitles. Let them cut a passionate promo in their native language and put up closed captions. Sadler says, I think Giulia might take a while like Io did. I haven't been impressed with her considering the hype she had coming into WWE. Hopefully she can break through. So a couple things there in the comments worth exploring. One, Jake, what do you think about subtitles for wrestlers who are speaking unpolished English, either because they're memorizing lines or they're just not real smooth with it yet? Even Shinsuke tonight could have used them. I mean, you had to really listen carefully to when he switched from Japanese to English and try to kind of make out what he was saying. They've done that in vignettes where it's clearly post-produced. What do you think the right balance is with that?
I think for pre-tapes, it makes sense. You know, I guess if you're going to have somebody cut a promo in their native language live, it's certainly much harder on the closed captioning folks to make that work. But it is possible for them to do live transcriptions of that stuff. But
or just do a lot more earlier today. Or a few minutes. They could even say a few minutes. I mean, they never do this, but they could say during our last match, Shinsuke crossed paths with wrestler X. Here's what happened. I mean, you don't have to pretend everything's live. Some of that stuff's shot ahead of time anyway.
Right. Well, like they just did on Monday with Vaquer and Liv, where I thought they made it like the worst of both worlds, where they had Vaquer do the promo entirely in Spanish, and then they told you later on in the show that you can watch the subtitled version on like the social media channel, even though it was clearly pre-taped and they could have put the subtitles in for the live broadcast. I didn't quite understand what they were going for there, but I do think that subtitles are perfectly acceptable, and they should make better use of them than they currently do, without a doubt.
Is Kiana James an example of somebody who might be a better fit for the main roster than NXT? Because that sometimes happens. Sometimes people don't shine in NXT and then they shine on the main roster, and sometimes it happens in reverse.
I mean, it seems like people were very high on her in NXT, and it may have been for reasons that weren't immediately visible with her on-screen character. I mean, my recollection of her time in NXT was her playing like this vaguely, like, she had this like office space that was vaguely like a porn set, and she was kind of doing this strange manager character, and I think it fit the theme of NXT at the time, which was a much different product than it is even today. But I think she's a good fit for the main roster because she commits. Like, she has a lot of personality. She commits to the bit. She seems like she can deliver lines accurately, and I think those are all qualities that they look for, and they have in short supply, really, in a lot of cases.
Forrest Malone says it's similar to some NBA players who didn't do well in college, but in the pro game they flourish. I mean, different things are asked of wrestlers. Sometimes just different leadership, or they just, some people regress and other people grow. So we can see. Mike Steph points out it hasn't helped Giulia that she hasn't had a storyline since her call-up. Just putting a belt on her isn't a storyline. That was a criticism early on. Like, hey, let's just give her a belt as a shortcut for creating a bond with the audience through a journey and getting people to understand who she was and why they should root for her. Is she still paying a price for that?
I think so. I mean, the creative certainly hasn't been great. She wasn't Asuka, who had this unbelievable undefeated streak coming up from NXT, and despite the language barrier, she also possessed a lot of physical charisma and had that reputation of being a buzzsaw going for her. And Giulia, seemed like she had a decent amount of presence in NXT, but it just never translated to the big arenas on the main roster. And you have to give part of that to creative. I mean, they certainly didn't design anything in a way that maximized the talents that she does have. I mean, you look at her entrance now, and it's kind of visually impressive, but it doesn't feel like there's any aura to it at all. They've kind of sucked all that out of her at this point.
Yeah, a couple other things, and then we'll move on to other topics here. Atlas here says Giulia is beautiful madness, and that's all they told us. She's not unattractive, but she's surrounded by beautiful women and portrays very little or any madness. Sean compares it to Vicaire. Vicaire's been hurt by just winning a title right away. She's more over, but nothing has happened with her since winning the title. And Darrell says Kiana James is not good on the is not better on the main roster than NXT. She hasn't had to carry a segment or a storyline where she has had to go out and cut a promo or get someone over. So that's a no. Interesting. Goodfellas says, shout out to Elias. I hated him in NXT. Like go away heat on the main. He was kind of fun. Sadler just says, even in NXT, Stephanie became the bigger star than Giulia, even though she was less hyped. Yeah. True. Let's see. Okay. Well, I'm looking if there's anything else here on this topic before we turn the page. No, we'll pause there. Let's briefly introduce ourselves on the show, and then we'll talk about other things on the show. Oba Femi, Trick Williams, two topics that I think people want to talk about, and more. This is the Wade Keller Pro Wrestling Post Show for Friday, February 20th, 2026. I'm Wade Keller, host of the show, editor, publisher, and founder of the Pro Wrestling Torch weekly newsletter and the website, PWTorch.com. I also host a variety of podcasts. The Red Logo Show is the Wade Keller Pro Wrestling Post Show. That is available as a podcast if you search Wade Keller in your podcast app. You can also watch our live streams on YouTube. After Raw, Dynamite, and SmackDown. That's where we are live right now on the PWTorch YouTube channel, and we have a live chat that we bring into the show and helps lead the discussion and react to things we're saying in real time. But you can listen to the podcast version of it on our podcast feed, and also have other shows on the podcast feed that are not on YouTube. Speaking of which, we also have our Blue Logo show. When you search Wade Keller, you'll see the blue logo pop up. That's the Wade Keller Pro Wrestling Podcast. That includes the weekly flagship episode, usually drops on Tuesday nights. Greg Parks, longtime Pro Wrestling Torch columnist, joined me. We covered a wide array of topics on Tuesday's show, so check that out if you haven't yet. We also have interviews, pay-per-view and PLE previews, media Q&As, and other flashbacks on that feed. So search Wade Keller and subscribe to both. While you're at it, search PWTorch and subscribe to the PWTorch Daily Cast. And also you'll see a charcoal gray logo pop up that says PWTorch VIP. That is a way that you can unlock all our VIP shows for a few days for free as a trial, and then it can roll over into subscription if you don't cancel using your Apple account. So you don't have to take out a credit card or add any payment. Just use your Apple account to unlock all our VIP podcasts. In addition to that, you also get an ad-free version of our free shows like this one. So it just skips right past commercials, which is a nice bonus in addition to being a VIP member. But a whole array of VIP shows throughout the week that you're missing out on by not being a VIP member. That's one of the ways to subscribe. You can also just search PWTorch VIP in Patreon or Spotify, patreon.com/PWTorch VIP. Another way to find our sign-up page. You get a 7-day free trial through Patreon or Spotify when you search PWTorch VIP. That also unlocks the VIP shows and gives you commercial-free versions of our free shows. Full VIP membership details at pwtorch.com/govip. This approach also at top tier unlocks nearly 4 decades of archives, customizable podcast feed, compatible with Apple Podcasts, by the way, along with many other apps on Android and iOS, plus streaming ability from our ad-free website. So all kinds of tiers and price points and packages. Check out all the details at pwtorch.com/govip. We're here to talk SmackDown, and my guest is Jake Barnett from ProWrestling.net. Jake, welcome. Good to have you back in the co-host chair.
Yeah, thanks, Wade. Always a pleasure to be here.
Great having you here. We'll talk more about what you do over at ProWrestling.net in a little bit. I do want to encourage people to call us if they want to. The link to be a video caller, or you can turn off the camera and be an audio caller, is in my TV report at PWTorch. Just click on the SmackDown report. And at the top and bottom, there's a link you can click, and you'll just end up in the waiting room, and we'll bring you on when it is time. You can also email us, wadekellerpostshow@gmail.com. Otherwise, join us in the chat. That's where all the action is right now, and give your thoughts as the show progresses. Sean Plichta, by the way, says Jake does a great job with Jason Powell over at ProWrestling.net. And he adds, Wade, hopefully you can have a relaxing weekend where you don't have to talk much. LOL. Yeah, I'm still hoarse. I think this was my rebound day health-wise after nearly 2 weeks, just kind of up and down with a cold. But the voice is still a little rough. So yeah, a weekend of not doing much talking would be nice. In fact, Goodfella notes, sounding more healed tonight, Wade. Hope your vocals are doing better. Well, we'll see in a half hour how I'm doing after doing more talking here. All right, Jake, we had another qualifying match for the Chamber. We talk about rising stars in WWE committing to new names. There's a lot of that going around, and I think it's one of the more exciting times to be a WWE fan is when new people are getting the spotlight. Is with all due respect to Cody and Sammy and Charlotte and all of that. I don't think there's any question that a lot of people enjoy seeing new stars rise, and Trick Williams is one of them right now, who is just getting really good crowd reactions as a heel. Fans like chanting along with him. What do you think about how they're handling Trick Williams right now and the way they told the story with and acknowledging the background with him and Carmelo Hayes in the triple threat match with Damian Priest?
I think they're onto something with Trick, clearly. The crowd noise is getting louder every week. People love the chants. It's going to be very difficult to keep him as a heel for too much longer. I do think he has, some chemistry with Carmelo Hayes that goes way back. I think their interactions are good. I think the crowd, reacted well to them in the triple threat. The triple threat overall, I think may have been the best match on the show, just in terms of execution. It seemed like it went pretty well, and the crowd was very happy with the finish. And it's good to see, Trick making it through to the Chamber as another fresh face, along with Javon Evans, and perhaps I guess we'll see what happens on Monday. Maybe it could be anybody, depending on how they decide to craft the Chamber match itself. But I think the overall presentation of Trick has been good. I mean, the whole lemon pepper steppers thing that wasn't over in NXT and didn't really catch on in TNA seems to be working on the main roster. I don't, you can never quite predict how those things are going to work out, but I think he's a fresh face who has a lot of confidence, and his promo ability continues to improve, and he's solid in the ring. I think he's a blue chipper for sure. He's going to be a star. If not soon, then in a year or two, he'll be right at the top of the food chain in WWE.
Is he an example of somebody who just works out a little bit better in what WWE looks for when they push a top star? Like Oba Femi was a top guy in both places. Trick was, but there was, I think, along the way, some doubt. I think part of it was just the way he started with Carmelo, where he's sort of the sidekick, and Carmelo was going to be the better athlete, and Trick was sort of the diesel or whatever, just the guy standing behind him, the heavy. Obviously developed a personality, but he was booked a little bit all over the place, including literally over to TNA for a while. What kind of backtrack to your thoughts on Trick's journey and what you've thought about the path he's been on, and what is it that you think, if you agree, is working better in his short time on the main roster compared to the ups and downs in NXT?
I think what we notice when people succeed on the main roster, whereas they seem stifled in NXT, is that their personality is often too big for the space that they're in. Whereas Trick, he's loud. He's wearing furs. He's got the most confidence of anybody you've ever seen. There's just a lot about him that plays better in a bigger space than I think it would in NXT. And that's not to say he didn't work at all in NXT. Like, he was clearly over, and you watch some of those NXT live events or PLEs, people were chanting along with his music the same way they are now when he makes his entrance on the main roster. But I think it's just a function of he's a very big, it's hard to contain a personality and a character that size in an arena that seats 800 people. It just doesn't even do it justice. And so I think there's just more room for him to grow, and he just expands to sort of fill the space when he gets into those big arenas on the main roster.
Yeah, I think everything you say is true, and you can kind of invert it and say it's easier to get over in a big space. It's also harder to take a gimmick like his seriously when he's in a small space. Like, it's like, who do you think you are? Like, you're in the developmental group. You're in front of 800 people. What do you mean you're now he's in these big arenas. He's on the march to WrestleMania. He has a gimmick that just really fits the optics of WWE Raw and SmackDown compared to NXT. So yeah, it can just kind of it can kind of be like, yeah, who do you think you are? Until this, yeah.
And it's easier to give that gimmick a little bit of time to breathe, right? He's interacting with bigger players. The audacity of it makes a lot more sense in the environment that he's in, because it's like, this guy's, he shows up and he's immediately acting like he's the, the king of the hill. And, in the face of, other development stars, it seems kind of ridiculous. But now it's just like, this guy is completely audacious. He's out of his mind, but now he's got a lot to prove. And now suddenly he's actually, living up to what he's saying, and that, that people can get behind something like that. When a guy talks big and then all of a sudden he's starting to back it up, I think that that's something that, even as a heel, people can respect and cheer for.
Yeah, Cavanti Smile says Trick continues to outshine everyone else he's sharing the ring with. Let's bring up Pun LV says it's easier to see as lemon pepper steppers in a big arena. Apparently helps. Powder River Pete says Trick commands a room. You won't catch him sweating. Sean Plitch just says Trick thinks he's a top dog and he's showing what he can do talking with top guys. And they did that from the beginning. Just having him share screen time with top wrestlers seemed like a deliberate plan to just go, look, he doesn't shrink on the screen with some people who have been big stars on the big stage a lot. And it goes a smart move. As for the match tonight, Derek says, I was hoping that Trick and Mello did have an interaction before the qualifying match, but otherwise was happy that Trick and Mello looked great tonight. Did you like what they did with Mello and Trick early on, and Mello kind of rejecting Trick's overture to maybe work together, and Barrett talking about their background?
Yeah, I think Mello's been up on the main roster. Is it 2 years now, or is it 18 months or something like that?
Roughly that, a couple years.
So, he's a different person than the guy that Trick knew in NXT, and he's grown a lot, he's changed a lot. And so I think it makes sense for his, initial thought to be like, who are you to just try to insert yourself into my life again, And so I think that's a good natural reaction, particularly because they're not aligned the same at this point. I think Mello is still is a baby face. And so, I think that fits, but I think it's going to be very difficult to keep them apart forever, whether it's in a feud or whether they find themselves in a reluctant partnership again. I think the two of them are on a trajectory, at least partially together, just given how they started and how much history they have. You can't avoid telling that story.
Yeah, Cavanti Small says Trick and Mello tonight demonstrated Trick has surpassed Mello in every category except for bell-to-bell in ring, but Trick can still put on a solid match. When we look at Trick, and you called him a blue chipper, what is the main thing that might hold him back? Everything just seems to be coming up roses for him. Things are going well. Is he able to have what he needs to have in the ring in terms of a WWE style main event match? And I'm kind of pausing because I'm like, the demands are different. Like, if you're really strong in some areas, you don't need to be, as good as Seth Rollins in the ring. But if everything stays the way it's going in terms of his personality, the crowd being into him, heel or face, does he already have enough to go out there and hold a main event spot where WWE management can be confident that he can hold the fans' attention and tell the story the way WWE tells stories in the ring at a sustainable main event level? Or is there still something to prove there?
I think it's unproven. I think he's in an enviable position right now, in the sense that you're making your debut. Expectations are not sky high. You are being put in a position to interact with people who are either legends or have been over for many years, and so they have credibility to lend you. And it's much easier to work around somebody's shortcomings in the ring than it is for WWE to work around people's personality deficits. We just spent a good amount of time talking about Giulia and the struggles they've had with her. And in comparison to Trick, who may be less polished in the ring than he is on the microphone, I think they have a far easier time wallpapering over some of those issues. Like the Trick shot, like at the end of that match with in the triple threat, like the second one looked terrible, but nobody cares. Like it's an easy thing to overcome. But if it gets to the point where now suddenly he's a world champion and he's being forced to carry other people who aren't as over as him, Like, what is, when you have to flip that equation, like, what does that look like? And I think that's when you find out, what somebody's medal is. But we're still probably, a considerable distance away from that scenario taking place.
Yeah, that makes sense. Sean Plitch just says, I just wish Trick would have gotten more offense tonight, but I still thought he looked good. It was a good match, some good hard-hitting stuff at ringside. You thought it was maybe the best of the night. What stood out as good, and was there anything you would change about the way that, in particular, Trick was portrayed, since Sean brings up that topic?
Just chemistry-wise, I think everybody worked pretty well together. Didn't seem like anybody was out of place significantly. There weren't any near falls that got screwed up. There weren't any. I mean, other than the one trick shot that looked kind of awkward at the end of the match, there wasn't any real botches or anything to speak of. I just think it seemed like it went smoothly. It seemed like everybody knew what where they were supposed to be and what was coming next. And maybe you could give Damian Priest some credit there. It seemed like he was the one directing traffic a lot of the time in the ring. And so, hats off to him for keeping everybody on time and whatnot. But you can make an argument that maybe Trick needed more offense, but he was getting the win. So, ultimately I think he got what he needed to in the match. And everybody else looked pretty sharp in the process. But I think what worked was essentially, just that it seemed like it ran like a clock. There wasn't a lot of mistiming or awkwardness or people waiting for the next spot or somebody caught on camera, just kind of like peering over the apron, waiting for to break up a near stuff that's kind of you can see through in some of these triple threats. We didn't really see any of that in that match, so I thought it all went off pretty well. Yeah,
there was no filler. It didn't feel rushed, and everybody's in the right place at the right moment, and that adds up to a good 12-minute match on TV. Speaking of directing traffic, Derek Mitchell points out during the qualifying women's match, you could audibly hear Charlotte say to Nia, "Hit me. That's all you got," and you hit like a bitch. At first, I thought "hit me" was calling a spot, but it seemed like it more was just
taunting.
Taunt. Come at me. All right. Some other things on Trick here. Oh, go ahead, Jake. You're gonna say something?
No, we can talk about it if we talk about the women's triple threat. But I've always had this opinion of Nia, and she's gotten considerably better. But she always looks like she's like me when I'm fighting in my dreams, where like she expends a lot of effort, but nothing she does looks like it hurts. And I think it's just something that's followed her around for most. It's just she can't do a whole in the ring that looks credible other than like a Samoan drop or sometimes she'll do her finisher well, but most times like she's throwing strikes and whatnot. It just looks like she's hitting people with pillows out there.
Yeah, a relatable dream. You just throw a punch and it's just like it's a noodle and it doesn't land. Yeah,
slow motion something.
Yeah. Forrest Malone says Trick has that look that exudes cool without me feeling like he isn't comfortable with it. Carmelo Hayes wants to look cool, but it seems try hard. There is an authenticity is such a big thing with Trick. It's just with any wrestler. You have to seem authentic in the role that you're playing. And if you're not, it doesn't guarantee you can, like Tiffany can be an authentic, arrogant airhead trying to be a babyface. It doesn't get her over. But Trick is really comfortable in his skin, so to speak. He's just plays the part super well. Drew McIntyre super believable right now, is full of himself. World championship heel who believes he's right about everything. So authenticity helps a lot. Roman Reigns flailed because people didn't think he was authentically the next John Cena or the next Hulk Hogan, and then they found something that felt authentic and he turned into a huge star. So that's the works. Todd Martin and I in the Fix were talking about I talked about Todd's been an advocate for Trick being a babyface. I said if he's going to be heel, they should change his music because you create this headwind for him to get booed if that's the way they're choosing to frame him with the music that everyone is singing to. And for the uninitiated, the people sitting at home, they're like, why am I booing this guy when the crowd seems to love him? It has these mixed signals. Todd's pushback on that is you don't want to lose. And as always, caveat, Todd might have said it differently or better, and I might be summarizing him poorly. So I'll stipulate to that. But there can be a counter argument that when you have something this over that has this much crowd reaction, don't mess with it. Like, let him come across as a star, and that's more important than the downside of undercutting him as a heel. Shinsuke Nakamura's music changed when he turned heel, for example. Becky changed her music. Seth didn't. We've been perpetually critical of that. What do you think about what's going on with the crowd with him? Or is it just let him be a heel for a couple months and then just make him a baby face and don't change the music? Or if the goal is to make him a heel if they have like an 18-month plan for him as a heel, do you kind of consider changing up the music so that fans can be really excited when he turns face to do this again, but they don't get it in the meantime?
Yeah, I guess I've met a number of people, and I think I'm stealing this from a Cody Rhodes appearance on a podcast, but he phrased it as like being a heel is taking things away from people, like you just not giving them what they want.
Yeah. Tables? You want tables?
Ways.
Nope.
Yeah,
I'm going to pull the table out, put it back under the ring. Yeah.
Yeah. So you could have him, shut off his music halfway down to the ring, or tell fans not to chant. If you want to, like, there's obvious gimmicks that you could apply here that would allow him to get some heat using that same thing that people love to cheer for. And so, I think they can make it work if they wanted to. I think it ultimately depends on what the long-term story is. If you're setting up, Mello, for instance, to be incredibly jealous of him and they want to do some kind of double turn, well, then let him bask in it for a while, and see where that goes. But I don't know what they have in mind for Trick at for Money in the Bank or for SummerSlam. And so it's one of those things where, well, let's see what they are doing with him at Mania, and maybe you change some things if they want to keep him heel. But ultimately, I think they have plenty of people on the roster that are kind of flailing at this point that could turn heel, and he could turn babyface and be just fine.
Yeah. Some other comments in the chat about Trick and also Carmelo here. Derek says, Mello is going to always out-finesse and out-wrestle Trick, but Trick seems to have a card up his sleeve. Cavante, I think I read this, but Trick continues to outshine everyone else he's on the screen with. And that, obviously is fans are going to be attracted to somebody who outshines other people on the screen. That's a big thing. Gilbert Arbala says Trick's lemon pepper steppers didn't get over in NXT or TNA, so you never know what will stick. Yep, no, that was noted earlier. Pile Driver Pete says, I think America has Trick Willie fever. Everyone's showering him with love. The thing, I don't want to be the babyface against Trick Williams right now. It's going to be hard. I mean, maybe fans can compartmentalize, like with Seth. The defense is fans want that communal experience. They pay money to go sing the song. They have fun doing it. But as soon as the music stops, Seth goes, ha-ha, and the fans start booing him. And, they kind of compartmentalize enjoying the ring entrance versus booing the man. It's not how I would almost ever want to present my characters, where you don't have a consistent through line of how the emotions that people feel. So I think you have that issue with Trick right now. But
do you think he faces Sami Zayn at WrestleMania? Like, it seems like that's something they're toying with, at least the possibility of it.
Yeah. I mean, Sammy's a compelling character. We can do it. Right, we'll do a whole segment on him in a second here. Because I really like what they're doing with him. That's why when I said, I like the young guys coming up, I said, but I like Sammy too. Like, I like what they're doing with some of the veterans too, and the dynamic. It's fascinating. And I mean, you want to have a big match for Trick and you want a big one for Sammy. And there is a bit of a, two ships crossing in the night. I don't know if my metaphor is working there, but we'll delve into that in a minute. As far as Trick goes, Derek says, I know a lot of people compare Trick to Booker T, but he reminds me more of The Rock in the Nation, and when The Rock became the corporate champ. I mean, I think there is a blend of those two. I don't want to, I think Trick can just be Trick. He doesn't have to be a blend of two people. Maybe there's some Sting in him or some Shawn Michaels in him too. I don't know. Just like, just people with a real confidence and an innate charisma that fans are attracted to. Jake, what do you think of the Rock, in particular, the Rock versus Booker T comparisons?
I mean, I think you could say that there's elements of both in there. There's elements of Dusty Rhodes. There's plenty of people that you could point to and say, oh, he's got, that same sort of magic that
David Von Erich, I'll throw out. If we're going to go with people who you wouldn't compare them to each other visually, David just had like a innate kind of like charisma to him that people missed out on with his early death. Yeah.
I mean, if you're, a lot of people just refer to it as having it, but he's got whatever that is, right? It's just people are attracted to his personality and they want to hear what he has to say and they want to see him perform. And so, I mean, you could name any number of people.
Early Conan in Mexico.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's plenty of people that had that going that you could point to and find similarities. But I think just putting him in the camp with those people is is incredibly encouraging for his future. So I think everybody's on the same page, whether they agree or not, and exactly who to compare him to.
I'm was more skeptical, I think, than average about him working on the main roster, in part just because, Oba was kind of overshadowing him, and Carmelo, I thought, was on. They kind of had a long story arc with him, and I just wasn't sure, and then there were, some NXT matches where Trick just kind of looked like it was dragging a little bit. And I think there's something about him in the main roster and the way they're pushing him that it's working well. Mark Biscotti says Trick may be the guy to bring Melo up to the main event. Yeah, I mean, the history with them could pay off for Carmelo. They could help each other. And I'm glad they acknowledge their history. I mean, you have to. It doesn't mean they'll continue to. Goodfellas says, I've been on this Melo ride since NXT to the main and enjoyed all the steps to get there. Sean Plichta says, yeah, I like Carmelo just as much, and he's doing well right now. I do think the ride with Carmelo is a high draft pick that wasn't panning out was a good story. And I said all along to Melo fans, he's getting a lot of TV time, and this doesn't feel like they're treating him as it didn't look like to me that they were positioning him permanently as a butt of a joke who was just going to, kind of like Miz is now. I felt like there was a story being told here, that they're going to have him on a journey where it looks like he got a big head, underperformed relative to expectations, but eventually, and he'd have to prove himself behind the scenes and, impress management for it to go through. But I always felt there was a path for him to go on an upward trajectory with some wins and overcome some early disappointment. And I think we're seeing that. I don't think he's going to be like Shawn Michaels in terms of his career. I don't think he'll be world champ. But I think he can be a mainstay, good, steady, top of the second tier type wrestler, a utility guy that can look believable against top tier guys. Jake, where are you on him?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really depends on if he catches fire at some point. I think he was getting really good responses for some of his matches, not that long ago in chasing the U.S. title. And so I think there's plenty of reason to believe that, he has a future. I think if you compare where the roster was when he came up 2 years ago to where it is now, I think Trick is benefiting from the fact that they really need an infusion of new blood right now. Like, they have a lot of top stars, but a lot of them have been in matchups that have been sort of repeating themselves quite a bit over the course of the last couple of years. Whereas Melo came up during a time when they had the bloodline really hot, they had Cody Rhodes really hot, they had other things going with that, that wouldn't have allowed him to get through to anywhere near that main event picture. And so I think maybe it was just more a victim of circumstance, whereas Trick is just hitting the ground running. And it seems like if he continues on this trajectory, he could be in main events in 6 months, or by the time we get to the end of the year. But I think there's still plenty of reason to be optimistic about Melo. But I think it seems like the ceiling might be a little bit higher for Trick, at least in the short term.
Salaversion 3 says, I doubt Trick wins the Chamber. Powder Repeat says, I say a little too soon for Trick to win the Chamber. My fear is Triple H likes to drag things out too long. Sean says, Cody winning would be boring because I really don't want to see them, those two face off again. Interesting from Cavanti Smalls, Trick and Drew could make for a fun, short post-WrestleMania mini feud. That would indicate one of the two turn, probably. Probably Trick. Sadler Version 3 says, I think Trick turns very soon. Crowd reactions are too strong. It'll kill the baby faces he feuds with if he stays heel. And, that is a concern. I mean, I say a job of Cody says the job of heel is to take things away. I think the primary job of a heel is to make sure the baby face, if you're facing someone at your level, is as cheered or more cheered by the end of your feud. It's sort of, it's the counter to wrestlers are just kind of in it for themselves, and they think any reaction is a good reaction, and some heels going for cheers. The job of a heel is get the baby face over, because by definition, the side effect of that is you're over as a heel if people are cheering harder for the baby face than they were at the beginning of your feud. I don't think that happens with Trick if he's facing a baby face, but against Drew, that's a super fresh matchup. I mean, Drew has some fresh matchups. Oba Femi is another possibility in there. I know, Jake, Drew and Trick, what do you think?
I think it would be interesting. I I hadn't even considered that Drew would still be world champion after WrestleMania. I kind of
Oh,
think.
fair enough. Yeah.
I
I mean,
kind
they
of
could
figured
feud
they'd be
without the
moving
title.
in a
Yeah.
different directions. Yeah,
Yep.
but yeah. I mean, if Drew needs a feud immediately afterwards, I think that would be interesting for him. I guess it depends on how quickly they want to turn Trick babyface. I think he would need to be one to feud with Drew, at least in its current incarnation.
Who are you assuming ends Drew's reign and when?
I think it's an open question. I feel like they had Sami Zayn point out that everybody knows you're going to be world champion again on this show, and probably soon. And I don't know if they're going to foreshadow it quite like that. I think portraying it as some kind of foregone conclusion probably means they're going to pull the rug out on Cody. And so I could see Jacob Fatu being the guy who stands tall at WrestleMania if they want to go in a controversial direction. I mean, not even controversial, just a different direction. I never thought Drew's title reign would be particularly long. I kind of figured, he was picking it up when he did in order to restore some credibility to his character and probably move it on to the next guy at WrestleMania. But I guess he very well could retain. That's a definitive possibility, depending on which direction they go. But I think we're going to see Cody in that main event match at WrestleMania. I just don't think he wins.
Let's shift to that topic. There's a lot of players right now with Cody and Jacob Fatu, Sammy, Trick, even Randy Orton. I mean, they amplified that in the main event tonight. Are we looking at a 4-way at WrestleMania or something along those lines? Like, they're setting so much. Now, they were setting up Charlotte Jade, and that doesn't look like it'll happen. So, they could be planting seeds for things afterwards. But, yeah, I mean, Jacob Fatu is world champ, maybe. I don't get the sense WWE is – this is just my, sense of trying to read signals. I don't sense that they're committed to him in that way. I'm not against it. I'm just kind of observing. It doesn't feel to me that they're going that direction. I almost would think that it's more likely Drew would retain the title than they'd give it to Fatu. I think they like Fatu in a different way, more of a, Kane type, not Kane was world champ, but, like not the centerpiece guy, but an attraction that they protect and feature. So, yeah, I mean, maybe they're still considering options. I don't know. What do you think, Jake? Where are things pointing? Where do you think they end up? Triple threat, one-on-one, 4-way?
I think it could very easily be a triple threat with Fatu and Cody, but adding Randy to the mix would certainly give them a lot of more options in terms of how to book that match. And so you could be right. They had Drew interfere in the main event of this show, and then it wasn't entirely clear to me if they were trying to portray like Randy thought that Cody was involved in some way. Just the sequence of events, because Cody, looked back to the ring and seemed like he might have been going to check on Randy or maybe, see if he could help him win that match. And he just decided not to. And so I'm curious how Randy, takes that and what he thinks of it next week. But yeah, I think going into the Chamber, Orton would be a good possibility. And so would Cody. But I think I'm not a fan of the idea of them going with some convoluted double pin or, some screwy way to get out of the Chamber where you have two guys that are forced into a title match. If they're going to add additional people to the match, then they'll have to find a creative way to do it on television.
Nick Aldis is telling Jacob Fatu, I got an idea. Let's talk. I don't know if you use the word trust me, but there's intriguing interaction with those two. And, because all this asked Fatu, remember how long you had to wait to get here. Just be patient. I need you to wait. Fatu's like, I'm not going to wait that much longer. It seems like all this has some sort of a plan. Jacob Fatu has a case. He got screwed. Cody, Sammy's making the case that Cody was opportunistic in a way that maybe undercuts him. It seems like the crowd is more with Sammy than Cody tonight in that way. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, they're keeping it interesting. I mean, I hope they know where they're going, and I hope it's in alignment with fans and that they steer reactions in a way that makes sense. But, when I'm very much not a proponent of triple threat in 4-ways, but I don't know that Cody and Drew itself, they've done it so much, can be a one-on-one match WrestleMania worthy. Sadly, I mean, if they hadn't wrestled, it'd be great. But they have. So that's where I start thinking almost for sure three-way, which has obviously been on the radar and probably the top pick for most people for a while, is Jacob Cody, and Drew. And tonight, I think, added to it where it seems like Aldis is like, I know you've got a case. Listen to me. He's got a plan. So Aldis will somehow create a situation where someone is added to the match. I don't know what that justification will be. What do you have an idea of what they could do to add Fatu and perhaps Orton or Sammy to that match?
I mean, I guess you could do. It's a difficult thing to do. Like, you could put title matches on TV, or some type of qualifying match, or maybe if it looks like Cody has been hurt by somebody, like let's say Cody wins the Chamber and they do some sort of injury angle on TV where they have to crown somebody else the challenger for WrestleMania, and then Cody miraculously makes a recovery and is able to compete. I mean, you could probably go with something along those lines, but yeah, I guess it's a difficult thing to do, because you've already told everybody that the winner of the Chamber match challenges at WrestleMania, and now you're going to have to make that essentially worthless, because people can find alternative methods of getting added to the match. So it's going to be a bitter pill to swallow no matter what choice they make there. There's really no way to win. But I do think you're probably right that Cody and Drew is not a strong enough match to feel like a main event, just given how many times they've gone back to that well. And so adding one or maybe even two additional people would probably give it a little bit of additional sauce to make the match a bit more appealing.
As good as Cody and Drew are on the microphone, and I think they're both really, really good. Drew's been great. Cody always feels like he's in search of something as a character and insecure about where things might be going. It can be a feature, not a flaw. But Drew is just so rock solid right now in the role that he's in. But as good as they are, I don't think one-on-one is a WrestleMania worthy match unless they just are super confident in something headlining night one, like a women's match, and it's a special attraction match and it's more of an ensemble. There was a key line from Aldis when Drew was hanging out after he bought the luxury suite, rented the luxury suite for the night, and Aldis approached Drew angrily and said, what are you going to do next? And Drew said, I was just having fun. And Aldis said, well, I'm not having fun. I gave you the night off. But then he said, but keep testing me. This is Aldis to Drew. Keep testing me, and I'll show you what I can really do. And then Drew told Aldis to relax, and he'd do him a favor and leave. They didn't overplay that line, which was good, but it's planted. That means Aldis is getting upset with Drew, and I think that was a bit of a tell. Maybe obviously so, but I think a subtle obvious, if there's such a thing, where we'll look back and go, that was the moment where WWE gave away without hammering it home so obviously that, Aldis is going to say, Drew, you don't just get one challenger. You're going to have two or three challengers because you deserve it. And I think they're going to frame it that Drew deserves to have the odds stacked against him because he just doesn't listen and he's such a big mouth. And and Aldis just had enough. And I think that's going to be the storyline justification. I don't know if the connective tissue is going to be great, but I think that will be Aldis's motivation. And I think they've shown us that tonight.
Yeah, they've certainly had Drew messing with a good number of people in recent months, whether that's whether it's Sammy, whether it's Randy Orton, Cody Rhodes, Jacob Fatu. I mean, there's no shortage of people that want to get their hands on him. I think it's going to be tough for fans to buy. It's cheapening the Chamber match in essence. Where
right. I think they're willing to do that to have a better WrestleMania main event, given ticket sales.
I think you're probably right, but it's certainly when the next time the Chamber rolls around, you really it's a kind of a harder sell. So I guess it's a double-edged sword in that sense.
I mean, you can just say next year it's an Elimination Chamber. We know the winner's guaranteed a spot at WrestleMania. We know in the past sometimes somebody else gets added. We can't rule that out this year, but winning the Chamber is the only way that you can guarantee you get that remaining title shot, the undeclared title shot at WrestleMania. In so many words, they can just say it's guaranteeing a spot, but not necessarily one-on-one. But then booking-wise, they ought to book 3-4 years in a row where every Chamber match ends with just one winner and a one-on-one match at Mania. So it doesn't become just a crutch where it is diminished. So I think they can manage it by, one, owning it, and then two, booking away from it in future years whenever possible.
And hopefully, if it's Cody, for instance, who wins the Chamber, I think you have to use that as a mechanism to advance some kind of character change for him, because it's like I didn't win the Royal Rumble. I did the right thing. I entered the Chamber, and yet other people are being rewarded. When they didn't win the match, they didn't put in the work, whatever the case may be. I think people are already starting to, I don't want to say dissociate, but in essence, the bloom is off in terms of Cody's peak popularity. And so if they're going to eventually get to the point where they're going to go in a different direction with him as a character, they have to start planting those seeds now, where his frustration grows and it becomes harder for him to justify doing the right thing over the long term.
I mean, and I don't know if they even know when they're going to actually pull the trigger on a Cody turn, but they are absolutely laying groundwork for it. They are heading in that direction as an option that they want to make sense when they decide the time is right. We don't know they might not know when the time is right, or they might have a couple ideas in mind and they just haven't committed to it yet. Positive Repeat says, please don't go back to Cody Drew. I'm so tired of it. Sadler, version 3, says, it just seems obvious the way the story is going. Drew screwing with multiple people, so this is how he gets the tables turned on him. Drew, Orton, Cody, Fatu, 4-way is my guess. Couple other comments in here. Sean Plichta says LA Knight would be fun too. I don't see, Jake, do you see that as an option? If this is a 3-way, or probably a 4-way is the only way LA Knight would get in?
I mean, I like LA Knight, but it doesn't seem to fit the trajectory of the story. Like it would feel pretty grafted on. I think it makes more sense to go with the people that Drew has been actually messing with on television in recent weeks.
Grafted on is a good way to put it when you just add someone who doesn't feel like the natural flow was to end there. Derek says Drew is feeling himself now, and all this will make him pay by making it a multiple person match for the world title. Rude Dog jumps in. Welcome, Rude Dog. Says, my ranking of potential Elimination Chamber winners so far to face Drew at Mania is 1, Trick Williams, 2, Randy Orton, 3, LA Knight, 4, Cody Rhodes, 5, Javon Evans. Is it possible? And I don't think this is on their radar, and it wasn't when Javon won on Monday. And I don't think it's on their radar now with Trick to win the Chamber, go one-on-one with Drew, unless they're like, oh, this crowd reaction, we got to capitalize on it. Let's not screw with it. Let's turn a babyface right away. But the reaction to Javon made me just think, should WWE think? Should we just do something crazy? Ticket sales aren't great. It's becoming a story. They jacked up the prices. They're in the same market twice. Vegas is a down market. Tourist-wise, a lot of people don't want to come to this country. So there might be fewer international visitors, all kinds of things working against it. Is that the time when you go, let's just throw something out there? Oh, and then they wouldn't really feel like they're sacrificing a red hot program with Cody and Drew if they went a new direction. Is there a chance Trick or Javon win the Chamber? Which one is more likely? Which one do you like more? And then to complicate the question, what's the fallout then for Cody, Randy, Trick or Javon, whoever isn't the winner, and Jacob Fatu?
Yeah, I think that's a can of worms, right? Like if you feel like you have to pull the ripcord on something like that, then it will have some pretty severe downstream effects where you're going to have to throw out a lot of what you've been doing on television recently. I guess if you wanted me to pick one or the other, it would probably be Trick at this point. I like Javon Evans, but he doesn't have that big personality that I think Trick would be able to convey if he was suddenly thrust into a main event scenario. But then you'd probably have to go, with people like Cody and Randy having their own feud, and maybe you could add Jacob Fatu to that if you wanted to establish whoever the next challenger was going to be coming out of WrestleMania. But yeah, I think it would be shoving a lot of people out of the way in a politically delicate situation, where you have a lot of people who have a lot of stroke and credibility backstage suddenly barking pretty loudly about the outcome of the Chamber. I almost think, if you're going to start planning those seeds of Cody turning down the road. You've already have him, essentially explaining that he seized an opportunity when he hit the crossroads on Sami Zayn. Beating popular people like Javon Evans and Trick Williams and others in the chamber in a similar way would kind of continue the Rolling Stone not heading down the hill sort of thing. But I guess I don't know ultimately who's going to win the chamber, but my gut feeling is that it's going to be Cody, and it's going to be a way that further gives his haters the ammunition they want to point towards him turning heel sometime down the road.
Yeah, I mean, I think when Cody wins the chamber and we get Jacob, Cody, and Drew in WrestleMania, people look back and go, oh, look at that February 20th show when we were talking about all these other possibilities and WWE just went and did the predictable thing.
Yeah.
It'll look predictable in retrospect. I don't think sitting here right now, even if we believe that's the plan, it doesn't feel like it's red hot enough to be something that we can say with certitude is something they're going to stick with. It's possible they're just thinking 3-way or 4-way. Let's feel it out. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's fun to explore other options. And I also think we should remove ourselves sometimes. Well, I think we do here, but I think fans in general who believe, well, I've heard spoilers, or I know how WWE books, or it seems so obvious this is what they're doing. There's a whole majority of fans. There's 20% super casual, 20% super hardcore, and there's just like middle 60% roughly who just watch the product the way that I watch a lot of my TV shows and sports. I'm not reading a bunch of articles on them. I'm not on Reddit. I'm not listening to podcasts on it. It's a pastime, but like sometimes there can be a trade in sports that happened 3 days ago, and I don't find out about it until I hit the play on the DVR. So I mean, I live it in other, and there's TV series I love, but I can't a week later have a conversation with someone about it because I just enjoyed it, but I haven't thought about it since I hit stop. That's the way my mind works. And how my entertainment fits in my life. I think there's a lot of people who watch WWE and even who would think of going to a live event, but they're not sitting here going, well, let me explain the way WWE books why Trick Williams can't win. So I say all that as a foundation to say, I want to give WWE credit right now, even if it's due to chaos and insecurity over the plan. This setup, I think for the middle 30, 40, 50, up to 60%, they're looking at this lineup going, I think it's going to be LA Knight's here. Oh, Trick is red hot. It's going to be him. Javon, there's no stopping him. And I think that's a good thing, Jake, to have, that I think people who watch shows like this sometimes diminish the importance of, because they're so sure it's not going to be them. So they don't even think about the story that's being told to a larger group of fans.
Yeah, it is easy to overthink and get lost in the meta narrative instead of the actual one that's being told on television, right? You kind of get locked into this idea that, well, yeah, this happened on the screen, but what else? You got to think a step beyond. And I think that's, we've heard Paul Levesque talk about that before, where that's why they have to have social media kind of deceiving people in a different way than they do on television, because they have to play off the people who are locked into the meta. And so I guess at the end of the day, I think it is encouraging that at least there's enough doubt about this that it doesn't feel like the chamber is a complete foregone conclusion. And I think a lot of years it seems like there's such a natural path for somebody that it gets a bit predictable. But this one feels a little bit less so. And so I guess they do deserve a little bit of credit for that.
And even if it turns out to be what all the Mr. and Miss Smarty Pantses know is going to be the case and can go, I told you so all along, it doesn't mean that your certitude didn't mean it wasn't an entertaining ride for the majority in the middle who are more casual viewers who WWE gave hope to. And I think there's enough moving parts right now where I think it's worth acknowledging that that's, I think, part of the viewing experience for a lot of WWE fans. You might disagree on the percentage, but I think people on Twitter and Blue Sky and Threads just think everybody's on there, and statistically it's just not. And a lot of people are on there, but they're not on the wrestling threads. So just every once in a while I want to let people know listening who to understand, one, there's a whole other group of people who experience WWE differently, and two, I don't want to be part of ignoring that group, because I think within WWE that would be a critique they have of a lot of the ardent fan podcast realm in social media. They I think go, you guys, you're not who we're marketing to. We are, and we got you. We don't want to lose you, but we have a broader audience that we're marketing to. So anyway, some other. Go ahead, Jake. Sorry. Yeah.
No, I think there's a fan base like the one you described for everything. Like if you watch, if you were a super fan of Breaking Bad 10 years ago, or
Stranger
Things, or your favorite television show, like
Industry.
There's a podcast for it.
Yep.
There's a social, there's 15 forums about it. There's entire social media channels dedicated to talking about it 25 times an hour. Like you can really overexpose yourself to something, and then you're in so deep that you talk to somebody who's a more casual viewer of the show, and they're like, I think you're insane. And I think it's something that you lose sight of as somebody who's in that far when it comes to professional wrestling.
Yeah.
That's not the most common experience, shared by fans, so it's easy to get lost in the sauce, so to speak.
Yeah. Lots of comments in the chat along the lines of what we've been talking about for a few minutes here. Let's kind of hit a variety of them regarding this Elimination Chamber and where it heads to WrestleMania. One note earlier about music changing. Just Derek Mitchell says, people forget Sammy's music changed when he turned heel. So just throw that in there. A general compliment from Sean Plichta. Drew is so good right now. By the way, do you agree with that, Jake? Is Drew just like the luxury suite, the body language, the mic work? Or do you think he's like, if you didn't know Roman and the Heyman group and all the people are in that realm on the #1 show, Netflix, they're the top tier, and Drew is sort of a secondary main eventer. Like, is that obvious? Does it have to be that way? Or do you think Drew is to the casual viewer just like it's as much Drew's company as anyone's?
Well, I mean, I think he is very good right now, and he's the best version of Drew McIntyre we've ever seen. Whether he's on the level of a CM Punk or a Roman Reigns in terms of notoriety, I don't think he's quite there. But at the same time, I think they've sort of booked him in a way where he's out kicking their coverage, right? Like they haven't booked him like a Roman Reigns or a CM Punk or a Cody Rhodes. I think if you're looking at the way that he's been treated on screen in terms of taking major losses, I think he carries himself with a lot more credibility than their booking would otherwise convince you that he has. And I think it's it's praiseworthy because he's certainly outperforming what they saw in him, certainly as a character. So I think he's a very convincing champion. I think he's a very good character, and I hope at some point their booking sort of aligns with how good he actually is.
Yeah, Drew's the second line on power plays for his NHL team, but he's getting more goals in the first line or matching them per minute played, that kind of thing. Yeah. All right. A few other comments on Trick. Sadler says, I doubt Trick wins the Rumble. Goodfella suggests Trick pinning Cody in the Chamber. We're getting way out there, but who knows? Sean says Trick just has a more likable charisma. Cavante Small says Trick could learn a lot from Drew, both in ring and on the mic. So the idea being if they were to wrestle each other or have a feud, it'd be a learning experience. And I think that WWE should be thinking about that. Sometimes there's players on NBA teams and they're kept around just because they want to teach young players how to be professionals or how to handle stress when the call doesn't go your way or you're not getting enough minutes or whatever. And they, you end up not getting a lot of time on the court, but you're on the bench for a reason. And Timbers have a couple players like that. And Drew is hardly a guy who's not getting minutes, but the idea of you want young guys to learn from veterans is super important, especially for veterans who are willing to help. And I don't think Drew has a bad reputation in that respect. I don't know. I've heard great things either. I haven't heard a lot, but I certainly would have heard bad things if he was just selfish. Sean says Fatu winning could be great. I don't feel they're going that route. Jacob is more on more of a story arc. Goodfellas says Fatu winning the chip is interesting. Also, I prefer Drew to stay champ. How is Trick even a heel right now? Yeah, I mean, I get that. I keep assuming they're moving towards the multi-man match for Drew at Mania that we're talking about, but I don't see a non-convoluted way to get there. We kind of covered that and did not come up with a solution. Rude Dog says, is it still the year of Orton, or was that last year? It's interesting. I don't know. What do you think about the story they're telling with Orton and putting him? I mean, I was thinking during his promo tonight, like they want to continue to send signals again to, I think, the majority in the middle that the booking team thinks about and would tell a lot of people in the podcast sphere, you guys don't understand where we're booking to a larger swath than you guys. And one of the deliberate things they want to do is set the stage for what happens later in the show, but also just create a story to believe in, like a believable alternate path that isn't their plan, but you want people thinking it could be where they go. And you want fans thinking there's enough going through the motions of Randy getting TV time that you could imagine him winning the Elimination Chamber and headlining against Drew. And right now, I think we can look at the way WWE's booking, and let's say a spoiler came out last November or last month that said they're going with Drew as a babyface against Orton as a babyface. Okay, let me get this right. Yeah, Orton as a babyface against Drew as a heel. One-on-one. They think that's fresh, and it's going to be Cody and Jacob and Sammy in some triple threat on the undercard, and they think they need to do that for XYZ reasons. There's nothing on television that would eliminate that, Jake, from being the story, and I think that's something WWE and Paul Levesque and his team should get credit for.
No, I think they're definitely trying to obfuscate where they're going, and they're like they had Aleister Black, sort of talking in Randy's ear tonight about awakening, former versions of his character, right? And that's certainly something that would be a plausible possibility for them to do if, for instance, Cody was going to regain the world championship and ultimately face Randy Orton sometime down the line in a major match, because people have long speculated that they were surprised that match hasn't happened yet, myself included. I always thought they would get to an Orton and Cody feud eventually. So the more, the more paths you lay forward without giving away too heavily which one you're on, it makes the chamber and it makes the anticipation of whatever the final WrestleMania match is that much stronger. And so I think having all these players in flux right now is how you make matches like the chamber interesting. It also has been in large part, just as a comparison, what has made the AEW title scene more interesting over the last couple of months is that you introduce a lot of people who are suddenly gunning for the champion, and it makes your title feel more important, and it makes all those characters feel more important. And so I think they're trying to, I don't think nobody's copying anybody here, but I think they're aiming for similar goals.
Yeah. Yep. Well put. Derek says, what about Drew retains at Mania with Sammy interfering and costing Cody winning the title? I don't know that they want to do an interference end to a world title match. That feels more like something that they would be willing to do on a different PLE, but not WrestleMania in the WWE title match. Jake.
Yeah, I could see somebody finding a way to break into the chamber and causing hell in that match for somebody more so than I would for Mania. But I think it's a good thought that Sammy or somebody like that could ultimately end up in a WrestleMania match because of some way they interfere in something at the chamber, if that's what they want to do.
Along these lines, Sean Plitch just says, I feel that Sammy could turn heel because he's arguing that he's been on a journey for 10 years, but he's lost a ton. So how can we keep getting behind him when he keeps losing? Goodfellas says, I think Sammy's saving his shady card to win a big match, but I could see him costing Cody too. Mark Biscotti says Cody turns on Sammy in the 4-way to win the title. And Sean says, Cody did take advantage of the all-cap stupid triple threat rules. And then Sean says, Cody did sound very heelish when saying Sammy's a problem because he's basically gotten in his own way. I don't think that has to be a heel line, but the crowd saw it as such, Jake. They booed it. They were on Sammy's side. That's good for whatever story arc they have planned for Sammy. Ultimately, I guess, unless they wanted to be a heel who fans resent winning the title. But Sammy and Cody, I think, are on a path that I could see going different ways and over a range of time spans. What do you make of the exchange with Cody and Sammy and even the crowd response to it?
Well, I think Cody is determined, and he did not apologize for taking what Sammy thought was a shortcut and capitalizing on an opportunity. And I think they're setting Sammy up, at least in my mind, for a guy who's just going to get fed up with constantly trying to do things the right way and having other people finish ahead of them because they were willing to take or make compromises that he wasn't. And so I think that's a valid reason to turn Sammy heel eventually. Whether that happens now or over a 6-month time span, I can't really say. But I think they're setting him up for circumstances to continue to arise where he feels like he's finally climbing towards grabbing that world championship opportunity, and the rug keeps getting pulled out from under him, and eventually it's going to drive him insane. And so, and Sammy's played those types of characters very well in the past in his career, and he's been on a 2+ year cycle now where he's been a consistent babyface. And I think they are sort of running out of underdog type stories to tell with the guy. And so you have to do something different. And I think they were just planting the seeds for that happening here in the near future.
Atlasphere says the crowd booed when Sammy apologized to Cody. Goodfellas says, I think Cody's being truthful to a point, but there's some shade to Cody beating Sammy after Sammy saved him. Derek says, I've said it before, no one likes a whiner, and Sammy is sounding like woe is me and needs an attitude change. Stop whining. I think Sammy will turn heel. Mark Biscotti says, I'd love to see Sammy win the title, heel or face. I just don't see them giving him that moment at WrestleMania. Sammy, this is from Goodfellas. Sammy has definitely had the opportunity and failed. Part of the journey. I hope the pinnacle is presented properly. What do you think they're going for with Sammy and Cody? And do they want us to be clearly siding with one or the other, or are they really trying? Is it almost like they're advocating? They're free to advocate for each other in a situation where it is up for interpretation.
Well, I think they're positioning people. If you accept the premise that they're going to do the predictable thing and have Cody win the Elimination Chamber and recapture the WWE title, which is something that Sammy sort of spoke into existence on this show, then you have Fatu, you have Randy Orton, you have Sami Zayn, all as potential opponents, just sort of lined up and ready to go. Yeah. And so I think that's something that Cody was really missing during his last title reign. It felt like he was consistently waiting for the next challenger to emerge, and whether it was circumstance or injury or whatever the case may be, it never really panned out, and he just had what felt like an eternal feud with Drew McIntyre. So if you accept that is like a likely scenario that he's going to recapture the world title, then I think they're telling stories now to prepare you for those next opponents that are going to be coming in between WrestleMania and SummerSlam.
Yep. Sean Plitch along these lines says, yeah, Sammy had a point there, but it feels like Sammy's complaining that he hasn't finished his story. But at the same time, he loses every time he has a chance to finish the story. They can steer this as they go too. Like if they think the crowd is siding with Sammy, but too strongly too soon, or if they don't want them doing it at this stage, they can adjust the interactions. I think Cody is not being a dick. Like he's being blunt, but I think Cody would go, why am I not allowed to be blunt? Like, why are you booing me when I'm just speaking the truth to somebody, but without like ill will? And I can see like Cody fans would think, why are you booing Cody? There's a double standard with him. People are just waiting to jump on him over saying something to poor Sammy. But it's kind of like, there's similarity there with Drew, where Drew is a heel for speaking a lot of times the truth. Now, Cody, I think, is more earnest and has a more fair version of the truth on his side. But I maybe that's a good sign for when Cody turns heel, because it'll be an explosion of ticket sales for people to go boo Cody.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the comedian Hannibal Buress who had that meme that was popular. It's like, why are you booing me? I'm right. Like, what do you? Like, what is your problem with me? And so, if they want to go down that road with either Sammy or Cody, I think there's enough ammunition there to do so. Yeah.
Rutak, did I read this? I could see Cody versus Orton at Mania with one of them turning on the other in the chamber. So just a possibility there. Let's see. I was looking at some past comments, what people are saying here. Tager Laga says Cody Rhodes against Sami Zayn would make sense at this point instead of trying to shove him into the WWE Championship picture. So there's endorsement of maybe a Orton Drew match instead. Sadler Version 3 says a crowd is turning on Sammy. I think him being a scumbag heel that resorts to cheating to win his title would be great heat. It's a story they should have done with Cena's 17. Tagar says heel Sammy was too forced until he joined the Bloodline. Powder River Pete said Sammy's frustration of almost getting there but just out of reach is relatable. Sammy versus Cody would be a great feud, says Sean. Goodfellas says, I just think Sammy's such a natural babyface. Why change? He's an artist to need it. If not, stay babyface would be my call. Yeah. So I tell you what, I just think Sammy is really good at being compelling, and I think there is an authenticity to his insecurity, because that is his reputation, behind the scenes too. I mean, he's not the guy that you want to be in the ring with, that you want to be in the back with, working out what the finish is going to be and how much selling he's going to be asked to do or how he's going to be made to look, because he worries about how he'll come across and expresses it in a way that drives some people nuts. And they play that on
TV. Did you hear that story they told on Kevin Owens when he did his appearance on Cody's podcast, where they both were just like, yeah, Sammy is making changes to the match while his music is playing. Like he's that guy. So
Yep. And people love Sammy, but they just don't love that part of the day when they have to work with him sometimes. Yep. Goodfellas says Orton is so easy, plug and play anywhere. Don't miss your window. He has high miles and a lot of money. I'm not. Orton is carrying himself like he wants. Orton has a body language that just is like, I'll go headline WrestleMania and be good. Like there's just a body language from right now that he seems. It's not like I need it, but I'll do it and I'll be good. I'm a pro and there's not a lot of time left. Let me go do it. I that's kind of the stride, and that's the what I feel is like his stride right now is his presentation is, if you need me, I'll do it and I'll be good.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's done just about everything that anybody could do in WWE. I think he would happily have one more run, with the World Championship or in the main event of WrestleMania if that opportunity presented itself. I also think he'd be perfectly satisfied, harassing the people in catering about ice cream if that's what they were going to pay him to do. He's just a guy who feels like he's content and confident with whatever he's doing at any given time.
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't think like he's lobbying and like, it's just, if you need me, I'll do it. If you don't, cool, I'll do something else. And I've had my time on top. I mean, I think he would choose to be on top. I just don't think he's going to act desperate or like freaking out if it doesn't happen. Anything else talking about it for a while, it's been fun, but anything else on the whole dynamic with the Chamber, the world title with Drew, anything else that kind of is you want to bring up before we turn the page to a couple other things?
No, I think we're good to move on.
Yeah. Let's talk about Oba Femi. We talked so much about Trick and a little bit of Johan Evans, even though that was on Raw. But Oba Femi continues to be presented and spoken about and framed as a future WrestleMania main eventer. I think more people are on board with Oba than Braun Breaker right now as a guy who's going to be in that spot. We saw more of Oba Femi's personality tonight than we've seen in every other appearance in Vignette so far. And that's not that they haven't done stuff in other appearances in Vignettes, but he interacted with Kit in a way where it seemed like Kit Wilson maybe was like legit cracking up, like losing the script a little bit, reading the poetry. It was kind of fun. But Oba was like, read me another poem. It was a little forced and contrived, but read me another poem. And it's an old one. I'm nervous. And then he was, sort of intimidated into reading an old one, and it allowed, gave Oba an excuse to kind of take it out on him. But it was fun. And Oba showed he's not just this one-dimensional, I'm going to do this on my way to the ring and have the music and hit some power moves. He was comfortable to look more natural, and you felt like you got to know him a little bit. So yeah, tell me what you thought about him tonight in the interaction with Kit.
Well, I think it helps you, thus far he's been kind of the caricature, right? Like it's just getting the broad strokes of who he is and what he can do in the ring across to fans. I think, they're starting to peel the onion a little bit by having him interact with Kit. He did seem like he had a good eye for humor, and he picked up on Kit being disingenuous right away, and was able to get him to read another poem where he had initially been critical of Oba, and that kind of fired him up and gave him what he needed. So I thought it was, it's a cute little segment, kind of harmless ultimately. I think the indecisiveness over whether he's going to be on Raw or SmackDown is getting a little bit tired. Like, I think they should make a decision and give him a direction, but that would be really my only criticism, is it seems like they don't quite know what they're doing with him yet, and it makes him appear to be less decisive as a person, which I don't think is what they want from him ultimately.
The line "one feminist to another" will live in infamy. I mean,
Oba did not deny that either, by the way. He
nor should. I mean, that's why Kit Wilson's gimmick is a babyface gimmick done obnoxiously, because the manosphere is obnoxious, and I mean, there can be a wide range of what defines a man, and Kit Wilson is making fun of, as a heel, ridiculous, narrow-minded bro culture that feels like it has an ulterior motive or wasn't well thought through. 9 things I hate about men. Men think they're never wrong, and that's toxic. How is that a heel line? Like that there's men who think you should never admit you're wrong. You act with no shame and no regrets. And you strut, I mean, I don't, what have you, what I've been outspoken about it, but what do you think about the Kit Wilson gimmick? Kind of reminds me of Daniel Bryan when he was like the heel environmentalist, where it's like, it's funny, but you're playing or the heel vegan environmentalist. It's funny, but you're actually, like in effect, you're trying to get booed for saying things that everyone should sort of ideally nod along to and go, yeah, that's actually good stuff.
I think it's intentionally tongue in cheek on his part. I think his portrayal of the character is aiming for, taking the, taking pot shots at the people you're talking about, the manosphere types who are essentially, just as an extreme caricature of the person that he's playing, right? It's just on the opposite end of the spectrum. And so I think it's, I think Kit has put a lot more thought into it than WWE creative has. And so that's why what we're seeing from him often appears to be so surface level and shallow. But I think there's the little touches to his delivery and, to his mannerisms and to the gear and to the music. Like, the whole package seems like it's actually a pretty well thought out act that WWE thus far just has no idea what to do with. So he's just, go ahead. Sorry. Is
it like subversive? I'm going to sneak this onto the air by pretending I'm a heel, but in reality, everything I say is going to make so much sense, and the crowd's going to love me because I'm going to be entertaining, that I'm going to end up being a babyface who's making fun of the manosphere.
Well, isn't that how you would have to subvert the creative at that point?
Well, given who's in creative, probably.
Right. Like, so if you're Kit and you want this to work, then you're like, all right, I'll do it your way, and then you just you kind of work with it as best you can.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think damage can be done by trying to encourage a bunch of kids in the audience to laugh at an effeminate acting, for lack of more sophisticated vocabulary on my part, but I guess that probably fits. Joke, punchline of a wrestler who is saying things that are spot on correct about the embarrassing, manosphere cultural rise the last handful of years. Because you're expecting people to laugh at him getting beat up for saying no real men, or that men should be vulnerable and have feelings and cry. Like, you get beat up for that. And it's entertaining. I can't endorse that if you're just thinking about its effect on people watching, vulnerable kids, or even some adults who are trying to figure out their way. Oh yeah, this is sort of having tens of thousands of people laugh at a guy who's saying men should show a range of emotions and there's not just one way to be a man. I don't know. I mean, it's not as bad as the Bushwhackers leading, kids against to chant the anti-gay F slur at the Beverly Brothers, but it's in the same category of like, you're getting kids to boost somebody who's playing a stereotype that I just think it feels a little irresponsible given the power of their platform.
Yeah, I don't think, I certainly wouldn't be doing it this way creatively. I think there's a way that you can use a character like Kit Wilson to chip away at the insecurities of the characters who embody the actual characteristics of the people that he's talking about. But there aren't too many even heels in WWE that are just outwardly like manosphere type of characters, right? Like it's not something they talk about all the time. And so you have him essentially having to invent things to talk about on a weekly basis that appear aimed at no one in particular. And so I think they, ultimately it just ends up being a little bit ineffective. Although I do appreciate the level of care that appears to go into his presentation on his part. It's just not written very well, and it doesn't seem to be targeted at telling a particular story, which makes it ultimately kind of useless.
It's there's an ephemeral joy to watching him do it until you think about it very much. Like Oba could have just patted him on the head and say, "I agree with everything you say, but man, you're obnoxious. I don't want to punch you," and the fans would laugh. Like, you're not wrong. I don't know who you think you're talking to. You're assuming things about me because I'm big and muscular that are wrong. It might be true about some other people around here. Like that's the babyface response to him is, you're assuming we're all like that and we're not. And you should just, calm down or whatever. I don't know. Anyway, I don't want to cut Oba's.
You're not wrong. You're just an asshole. And that's just the way it is.
Yeah. Powder Pizza's Magar, so insecure. It's laughable and sad. And part of that is a baggage WWE has, just in terms of as a company and, comes across like, is there an ulterior motive, or is it symptomatic and revealing of a mindset that is so in their little bubble that they think will work, and it turns out it won't. Okay. Anything else on Oba and how he came across tonight? I focused a lot on Kit there.
Yeah, no, I think they're on the right track with Oba, but they have to figure out a path for him. I think it's you're chipping away at him little by little by having him appear to not have a direction. And I don't know if they're waiting for Mania or what they're doing, but it does seem like they brought him up and they're just kind of killing some time at this point.
All right, I have a super chat from Derek Williams. I want to get Derek Mitchell, excuse me. I want to get to here. With Javon Evans qualifying on Raw and Trick qualifying tonight, this marks the first time two black wrestlers have qualified for the Elimination Chamber match since 2015 with Mark Henry and R-Truth. Paul Levesque had said, be patient. We got a pipeline. There's people we're high on. It's not gonna be so Lily White at the top or Samoan at the top of the roster. It's just happenstance, but he oversaw NXT for a while. But we are seeing it show up in different ways now. There is more black representation on the roster, on the rise, or even ready for main events than we've seen in a while, Jake. And obviously that's a great thing that should happen based on merit and opportunity and open-mindedness on the part of people in management to not just go, well, we filled those two spots. Now I need to go into my familiar territory where I can tell the jokes to the people that and feel comfortable telling the manosphere jokes that I want to tell, or whatever. So do you think I'm overstating the diversity change this year compared to a couple years ago when Levesque was taking some heat?
Well, I think there certainly have been improvements, and I guess he's always had his favorites, which has been obvious if you've been watching, and that's that's natural for anybody. I think you're going to pick and choose the talent that you want to get behind, but diversity is WWE's path forward. It's one of their greatest assets, because if you're looking at culturally areas to expand, I think that's clearly who are in the audiences. Like look at a WWE audience. It's a much less lily white demographic than you would imagine attending these live shows. And so fixing the issues that they have with representation should be high on their list of things to accomplish, because you definitely want to encourage more growth in those areas otherwise. And they have big plans for Latin America. They have big plans for expansions into other parts of the world. You're going to need more diversity in terms of talent and who's represented on your screen. And I think, black wrestling fans have had a similar complaint for many years that, there have been talents that have had, incredible range as performers who just had never quite gotten the same exposure as others. And I think they're accurate to point those things out. And hopefully Paul Levesque is sincere about fixing that. But I think their complaints are well met. I hear them, and I'm definitely not the right person to be articulating them either. I think that's better left to others.
Yeah. Powder Repeat says Oba and Evans are guaranteed stars. Glad to see history made. Derek Mitchell led the super chat on this topic, says, LOL, they were calling NXT African NXT with all the talent of Oba, Trick, Mello, Solruka, Kalani, Jada Parker, Lash Legend, and Ricky Saints. Yeah, I can't disagree with that. Not a huge topic, but Johnny Gargano and the Crate, two separate topics, but they overlapped literally tonight. Talk about both of them, Jake. What do you think about this Johnny Gargano taking a sort of comedic slapstick turn, despondent over losing his partner and the way things are going, and he's just flopped like my dog after the dog park. You just don't know where he's going to be, but you know he's just going to be like just a banana, just laying around like a banana peel, motionless somewhere. So talk about that, and then also what do you think of the big Crate and where that's going?
I guess as far as Gargano goes, I'm amused. I don't know what the payoff is going to be, but laying on top of the Crate got a laugh out of me. The Crate itself, I mean, I think it's, people are going to pour a million possibilities into the discourse about what that could be. I think it's a fun MacGuffin and a payoff for the pay-per-view. I don't know, if it's going to be a debut, if it's going to be, it could be any number of things. Who knows? But I think it's an effective sort of lever to get people more interested in the pay-per-view because you have a date on the thing that at least tells you when you can tune in to see what the hell the thing is.
Derek Mitchell says that's a fan of Johnny Wrestling, not so much of his character in the way. I mean, obviously he showed he could do this, and I think I think Johnny Gargano as someone who wants to survive on the main roster isn't at his size, age, and the people surrounding him right now, who they're excited to push. You kind of got to figure out, how do I stay on TV? And getting 10,000 people to laugh, and then you can actually go deliver and take bumps to make someone like $1 million, whatever the payoff is, in the ring and have a good match, and you're just a good guy who people like, who's paid dues, and you have a connection with, Paul Levesque, the booker, through NXT, some fond feelings there with not many people left from that era. Adam Cole and Roderick Strong and Kyle O'Reilly and Tommaso Ciampa are all gone, in terms of the takeover kind of main event mix era. Johnny's a guy who, I'd just be loyal to him. So I think he's also just kind of trying to survive a bit with everything going on.
And Candice found her way into a match. I mean, I guess that's a side effect of this. She got booked for a match next week, and I think it's her first singles match in half a year, probably. Like I can't remember the last time I saw her in a singles match on television. So I guess it must be working to some extent.
Rudog says Gargano was over in NXT, not so much on the main roster. Swole74 says Nick Aldis needs a better writer. The line should have been, he's feeling Crate, not he's not feeling Crate. Either way works. By the way, should Gargano, as they ship it off to Raw, should he still be on the Crate in the same position on Monday, or is that too slapstick?
No, I'd go for it. You got to go all in on jokes like that.
Derek says, I always thought Johnny was a dork when he turned heel in NXT with The Way. Sean says, I cracked up, but Gargano has so much more to give. Powder Repeat says, when your tag partner goes down, it often leads to doom. Kit got a 1-up. There we are. That's true. Let's see. What else? Anything I haven't brought up that you want to comment on, Jay, because I kind of scroll through other options here.
I'm trying to think. I mean, I thought the Jade and Charlotte interaction was interesting.
Yeah.
It seemed like Jade was more interested in getting in Charlotte's face than vice versa. And so I'm curious if there's going to be a call out at some point. But we'll see what they end up doing with the chamber match itself. But Jade's title reign, I mean, obviously she had her first title defense after 100 days last week against Jordan Grace. It really, and they seem to be putting her right back into the mix with Michin and that kind of stuff on this show too. So it just kind of feels like a title reign that's waiting for some kind of angle to pick things up. I don't even know what they ultimately have planned for Jade, but it seems like a Charlotte match might be her best chance to do something really meaningful in the near future, unless they go with Bliss or somebody like that.
I nodded, but I don't think Jade just seemed all that way more interested in the confrontation than Charlotte, because Charlotte's when it came out while Jade was still celebrating and could have walked past her and not made eye contact, but she stopped and looked at the belt and looked at her, made her point and kept walking, and that I think triggered Jade. I got to be the alpha. I'm going to chase her down. I'm feeling insecure. I can't let her one at me like that. It felt it felt like Charlotte poked Jade and Jade decided I'm going to push back.
Yeah, I guess maybe I wasn't maybe I didn't catch it as closely as you did, but it seemed to me like Jade was gotten to pretty much immediately, which is her character has always been cool as the other side of the pillow, and so to see somebody rattle her like that so quickly was interesting to me.
Derek says Jade's promo was a mess. She mentioned facing whoever, Tiffany, Rhea, and Alexa Bliss, but forgot to mention Asuka, who also qualified. I don't know. That could be it's probably not a story beat, but I wouldn't say that in and of itself is a mess. I think Jade was good in her promo. I think you don't want to leave her out there too long, but you don't want to look like you're just protecting her so much. But I think it's fine to be a main eventer who makes her point quickly, gets in, gets out, and moves on. Her ring entrance, her presence, a few words, a catchphrase. I think any more than that, you're putting at risk of diminishing returns.
Yeah, I mean, she was clearly not scripted to say a whole lot, and that's fine. I think it's, she's got a long way to go in the ring. I think she's still a work in progress as a character. I think that's a fair statement.
Maybe not making progress. This might be her.
Yeah, and so to overexpose her would be the worst thing that you could do. It's better to have her keep her comments brief and targeted and to the point than to have her out there, with 3 paragraphs worth of lines to get out, and she can only remember half of them, or whatever the possibilities would be there.
Yeah, or just screw up like AJ Lee did Monday and get a few lines wrong that causes people to look at you differently. Sadler version 3 says Jade's promo was fine in my opinion. I don't care if she forgot a name or two. She mentioned the biggest threats, which is fine enough for me. The Wyatt 6 and Solo in the MFT storyline continues. I do not mind doing a post show not talking about it because I just don't think people really care, but it looks like they're going to try to give it something next week to either pay it off or get people to care a little bit. They've got the tag match scheduled. What do you think they did this week, good or bad, to get people to care about what's coming up next week with Solo, not a tag match, a singles match, I should say, with Uncle Howdy, Bo Dallas against Solo Sikoa and the leaders of both groups?
I mean, I don't know that what they did tonight was necessarily bad. I still don't think anybody's going to care.
Yeah, that's kind of where I am. Yeah,
these characters have been beaten to death at this point. I don't know ultimately if it's going to mean anything for anybody when it's over with. What are they going to move on and do? It doesn't feel like the tag division, as long as these two teams are the focus point of it, is going to be particularly exciting in any way. I think it's time to move on, and whatever magic they might have captured with that initial introduction of the Wyatt 6 is long gone, and I think the members of the of Solo's faction and the MFTs, they might be better off moving on to other things. I don't think there's much cohesion or sense to keeping them together as the MFTs for much longer.
The Wyatt 6 were creatively abandoned early on. That's the term I use. They just okay, we did our job, and now what? And I know there's some things with Bo Dallas's dad that might have taken him out of the mix, and some injuries and different things that diverted things. But I still think there was potential, and I was an advocate for it, for Bo Dallas to be more than a derivative imposter to Bray Wyatt, but a follow-up, a younger brother dealing with a loss. Maybe they didn't want to dwell on it a lot. Maybe it would have to be more subtext than overt because you don't want to be a downer all the time. But he could have made it, the character, his own. And I just don't think he or the writers had it in them or had the idea of what to do. So he does just kind of seem like a derivative Bray Wyatt Fiend cosplay with an alternate personality. And maybe that is the ceiling. Maybe it's a lost opportunity that they should have put more time into. But even developing the supporting cast, Dexter in them. I mean, they what you see is what you get, but there's nothing more added. Now we're kind of like that with Solo and the MFTs. I mean, JC Mateo, there's no character development with him. They're just stormtroopers. And I mean, it's fine if you don't see a lot in them and they are just stormtroopers. They're just there to, get shot and fall over in matches. But then you try to get people to care about Tonga and Shinsuke, and it feels like, well, okay, you got to do it because it's a 3-hour SmackDown, but no one's going to care.
Yeah, I mean, the Wyatts are sort of, it's a cover band, not quite ever going to reach what the original was.
Yep.
And I feel largely the same way about Solo and the MFTs. It's like a cheap impersonation of what the Bloodline was a couple of years ago. I think people have largely moved on from it, and the people who made all of those things a success have largely moved on from it. And so it's creatively abandoned is probably the right term, but I almost can't even blame them. I don't feel like there's much to be mined out of those things anymore.
Yeah. Very good. Jake, tell people how they can hear more from you, read more from you over at prowrestling.net.
Yeah, obviously, just head over to prowrestling.net. There's an ad-supported site that you can read my weekly reports, which I typically cover AEW Dynamite. If you're interested in membership, you can check that out at pwmembership.net. That would get you access to the audio reviews that I do for Dynamite, as well as when I join Jason Powell for our .net weekly audio show, and then also all the pay-per-view audio reviews that I'm a part of. But that's typically where you can find me, and I enjoy all my contributions and what I can do for the site. So I'm sure if you've listened to Jason and I before, we have a pretty good rapport. We've been doing it for, I don't think it's like 12 years now. And so we have pretty good conversations every week.
Yeah, the .net flagship it should be on people's weekly must-listen list, or give it a try, pwmembership.net, and I think it'll displace something else you're listening to that's a little more shallow, or a little more, I don't know, rah-rah part. I don't know. I don't listen to a lot of other wrestling podcasts, but because I'm just too busy doing them and doing my job and all that. But I mean, the feeling I get is there's just a lot of mediocre takes out there, or newer takes that in a few years might be good, but they're not yet, and you and Jason, I think really, get me to look at things differently, or fill in some gaps, or just, whatever, advance my thinking on certain topics. So certainly recommend supporting a small business that's not corporate owned, not beholden to any company that they're talking about. I think you guys are really fair. And obviously I love doing shows with you, and I've done shows with Jason forever. So I'm very much encouraging people to support them and what they do over at prowrestling.net. The membership is the key way to really show support, pwmembership.net. Jason will be on the flagship in a week and a half again on the Blue Logo show, but you can check out the last show I did with him a week and a half ago. Just search Wade Keller in your podcast app for that. Jake, thanks. Always a pleasure talking with you about wrestling.
Thanks, man. Appreciate your time.
You bet. All right, I'll throw the banner up on the screen for you guys if you want to dive into VIP membership right now. You can do so. PWTorch.com/GoVIP. My voice is at its limit, so the timing is good here. Thank you, everybody. We'll talk to you next time.